Señores claustrales, sentaos y cubríos. Ábrese la sesión. El señor secretario general leerá el acta de nombramiento de doctor honoris causa por la Universidad Complutense del excelentísimo señor don Rafael Mechulam.
Decreto rectoral 4/2006 de 27 de enero disponiendo la concesión del título de doctor honoris causa de la Universidad Complutense al excelentísimo señor don Rafael Mechulam.
One of the topics that I decided to work on was the chemistry of the plant Cannabis sativa. Cannabis had been used for thousands of years, both as a drug as a recreational agent, but surprisingly, the active compound was never isolated in pure form. I decided, together with my colleague Yehiel Gaoni, to go and do research and find out what are the compounds present in cannabis, and particularly what is the active compounds present there. I was at the Weizmann Institute at that time, a very young person. I went to the director of the Weizmann Institute, the administrative director, and asked him, do you know anybody in the police who can supply hashish to us for research? So he called one of his friends, can you supply cannabis to one of our researchers? And I hear from the other side somebody shouting, is he, meaning me, is he reliable? And the administrative director, who actually almost didn't know me, said, yes, of course he's reliable. Let him come over and pick some hashish. I went over, I didn't have a car, took a bus, got 5 kilos of hashish, went on the bus, and people in the bus after 15, 20 minutes, just started asking, what the hell is this smell, very unusual smell? I mean, I had 5 kilos of hashish in my bag going around.
Cannabis was used in the Middle East for thousands of years.
As medicine.
Who knows, maybe for other things as well.
Many of the tribes at the time used cannabis.
Assyrians used it for medicine, used it for excitation, as used it in religion. The Egyptians used it as medicine.
Surprisingly, the Greeks and the Romans didn't know about the psychoactivity, but they used cannabis as an anti-inflammatory drug. Cannabis in India was used by people who want to be delivered from all worries and care. Well, that's quite a good definition of anti-anxiety.
We knew that cannabis had been used for epilepsy.
In the past.
In the past, there is, for example, a translation of Arab story of the 15th century, and it says that one of the Arab leaders had epilepsy. Physician came over and gave him cannabis, and it cured him, but he had to take it for his entire life. So the field kind of told us, try it on epilepsy. Hashish contains about 4%, 5% cannabidiol, so it is really quite difficult to isolate, to obtain large amounts, but we did that. We were happy to note that indeed they had no seizures while they were taking cannabidiol. And it was published, and nothing happened afterwards. So far, 34 years later, this is the only publication of cannabidiol in humans against epilepsy. When one starts research, one never knows how it ends. You know how you start.
In 1986, in the introduction to cannabinoids as therapeutic agents, after summarizing the knowledge about the historical use of cannabis, you leave us with a question. Are we missing something? What is that thing?
We knew a lot about the plant cannabinoids. They had been evaluated in the test tube. They had been evaluated in animals to a certain extent in human patients, but nothing was known at that time about the mechanism.
Dr. Howlett found in the brain a specific receptor for THC. It was named the CB1 receptor, cannabinoid receptor number 1.
Now that was a major discovery in the mid-80s. So here we had, for the first time, an indication that THC acts on a receptor.
So that was the first momentous discovery. And then once it was discovered that there are receptors, then the next obvious question is, why are there receptors in the human brain for a smoke substance? How did God know that his creations will smoke marijuana?
Receptors are made for compounds that we produce, not because there is a plant out there.
And the answer obviously was that it's not for marijuana. There are some compounds in the body itself which mimic marijuana.
Rafi Masulam and Roger Pertwee and myself were all sitting outside in the sun, overlooking a nice little river. And 2 years before, I said to Rafi, if I isolate this chemical, I get to name it, don't I?
Bill was interested in these Sanskrit stories, and he found that Ananda is bliss, delight.
People who know me know that I study Eastern philosophy, and I know lots of Sanskrit words, you know.
Ananda means in Sanskrit supreme joy.
Professor Meshulam said, you know, it can be a good, it will be a part just on chemical nature of this compound, and because it's ethanol amide. So we did Ananda and amide, so it's anandamide.
We dropped, or she dropped, THC in oil, in olive oil, under the tongue, at 2 or 3 times a day, small doses, during the anti-cancer treatment. At the beginning, we wanted to do a double-blind study. Some of the children got the THC, some other children got only the olive oil. After a week, she told me, I'm not going ahead with that. I know exactly who is getting the THC. I know exactly who is not getting it. There was a complete separation. Those that didn't get it continued to vomit. So she went ahead doing an open study, and she gave THC, pure THC, under the tongue about 400 times, which means that those that were involved in the experiment got it every time they were treated with whatever they were being treated. And at the end, we saw that we had complete block of vomiting, complete block of nausea by small amount of THC, which did not cause any psychoactivity, nothing. Professor Guzman is a major researcher in Spain. He has worked on the mechanisms through which cannabinoids act on cancer.
In our hands, classical cannabinoids are the ones that work best, by large, in inducing cell death in cancer cells.
THC comes from cannabis or comes from synthetic?
THC coming from cannabis. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it's THC, the real THC. Now we know that cannabinoids can exert anti-tumor actions in animals, not only in brain tumors, but in many different types of tumors. We know that cannabinoids act not only by inducing cell death through that specific mechanism called apoptosis, but we know that cannabinoids can tackle other processes of cancer cell growth, such as angiogenesis, metastasis, cell cycle, etc.
I have one dream that comes on and off in very different ways. I'm in a city that I don't know, and I don't know how to go back to the hotel I'm staying, and I don't remember the name of the hotel, and I get into an anxiety and I wake up. And this has happened many, many times. So I think it has to do with whatever happened in the Second World War, when my parents told me, remember these names and these addresses, because if we disappear, you should go there. Which is, well, not very pleasant, which is quite a shock, probably to a child. And of course, we were very afraid that we'll be separated, my parents and I. I was afraid. I now remember more than I did over the many, many years that have passed since then. All the people, they start remembering things that happened in their childhood. In people that are Alzheimer or Alzheimer-like patients, they got it in their food, in the yogurt or whatever. Some of them, I believe, not all of them, but some of them were in a better shape. Some of them started speaking, their eyes became brighter. In one case, an ex-writer started writing again. In another case, a woman said, I feel fine, and went home. And I would like to end with something that's really crazy speculation. Each one of us has a different personality, and we have no idea why. Why do we have different personalities? Well, part of it is the effect of the environment, okay? But part of it is genetic, and we don't know why we have different personalities. One way of explaining it is there are several hundred compounds, endocannabinoid-like compounds. They are like anandamide in their chemical structure that are present in the brain, and it is quite possible that each one of us has a different, slightly different level of these compounds. This is genetic. This is based on the different DNA of everybody, but DNA doesn't affect the personality. It is the compounds that are formed from DNA through RNA to proteins and peptides and secondary compounds. So it is quite possible that differences in the endocannabinoid system and the cannabinoid-like system can have something to do with the different personalities. Well, that's a very complicated story, but it may work.